Benny and Caroline hadn't been dating for that long, even though still thought already that this was their great love. And even though they loved to spend every wakening moment together, it was time to say goodbye for now. Caroline was heading on a long-awaited and long-anticipated vacation. For the time of her absence, she asked her boyfriend Benny to look after her pets. And without giving it a second thought, Benny agreed, and so he moved into her house in Munich for a couple of days. And Benny had to admit, he loved Caroline deeply, but living in her house, that was a challenge. The whole house smelled like weed and incense sticks. It took him days for the smell of the incense sticks to finally clear out. But soon, Benny would wish he were still dealing with that. As the scent of the incense sticks faded, another strange and disgusting smell filled the house. The smell of decomposition. And it apparently came from the attic. Covering his nose and mouth with his hands, Benny dared to climb up the stairs to the attic, uncovering the horrifying secret his new girlfriend had been hiding. My name is Holly. I'm so excited you had time to join me again for another episode of my true crime podcast, The True Crime Cocktail Hour. Today, we start off with a new main topic, deadly women. So over the next 8 weeks, we will travel to Germany, Spain, Belgium, and Italy together. And today we start off with the case from Germany. So sit back and relax, get comfy, and then we get started with case 1, deadly women, the circular saw murder of Munich. This young lady right here, this is Caroline. And Caroline is 18 years old, and she's in the middle of moving houses. Her mother and her aunt, they own this house together in an area in Munich that is called the Bacon Belt, and it's a very upscale area. But neither her mother nor her aunt needed the space, and so they allowed Caroline to move into this house. I mean, oh baby. Can you imagine? You are 18 years old and you get this house for yourself, this whole entire house with a garden up front in an upscale area of Munich. And even better, Caroline did not move in alone. Her boyfriend Nicholas, 4 years her senior and her first ever relationship, moved in with her. Nicholas was funny, charming, thoughtful. She loved so many things about him, and he was studying linguistics and Japanese studies at the university in Munich. Now, Caroline, she's still quite young. She just finished school and she doesn't really know what she wants to do with her life yet. So this house that they were moving into had a kitchen, a bathroom, and 3 separate rooms on the ground floor. And one of these 3 separate rooms had stairs leading up to the attic. It wasn't fully finished, but it was enough to serve as a bedroom for now. Now here's the deal. Nicholas and Caroline are both quite hippie-ish. You know, they smoke a lot of weed. And then Caroline also adds to the vibe with her incense sticks. And I mean, like, household and keeping things clean is not entirely on top of their priority list. So the laundry is piling up, as are the dishes, and the garden is just totally overgrown after just a couple of weeks. So a few months in, Nicholas and Caroline realize that they actually don't need the second and third room on the ground floor. So they decide to rent it out. And since their house is only 45 minutes away from the University of Munich by public transportation, and Munich's housing market is a nightmare, they get quite a lot of responses. And so before long, 2 roommates moved into what Caroline had described in her ad as the Villa Villacula. But that was not the only thing that was new in Caroline's life. She had finally decided what she wanted to do in life. And so she decided to go study social work. And she really leaned into it. She was really disciplined and determined. So she spent a whole lot of time studying and learning. Nicholas, on the other hand, he started slacking. Basically, he just spent his entire day sitting in front of his computer and playing video games. His wheat consumption skyrocketed, even so much that Caroline was bothered by it. You see, Caroline wanted to talk to him about that, which, as it turned out, wasn't that easy, because most of the time, he was just super high. And when he wasn't, he was so moody and prone to violent outbursts, which was a whole completely different side that Caroline had never experienced before. Generally speaking, their relationship deteriorated quite fast. Nicholas didn't want to do anything anymore, and that was a huge problem. Caroline loved to go out and meet new people. She loved art exhibitions. She loved to go on concerts, to a restaurant, go hiking. But Nicholas didn't want to do anything. He refused anything. And his explanation was that this would be the perfect opportunity for the people out there to watch him and spy on him. So Caroline thought, okay, fine then. If we can't go to the party can come to us. So one evening, she invited all of her friends over for, some drinks and chatting and laughing, and everyone was just sitting in the garden, just hanging out. It was super fun. And Nicholas, in the meantime, he was just sitting there and he didn't say anything, right? But he became more and more furious over time because they were laughing about him. They were making fun of him, even Caroline. And so at one point, he just exploded out of nowhere, yelling at everyone they should stop making fun of him. So everyone, including Caroline, were obviously very confused. And they tried talking to him, and getting to calm down. But there was no talking to him anymore. And Nicholas ended up throwing the whole bunch out of the house. Caroline, as you can imagine, is mortified. She feels bad for Nicholas that he thinks they were mocking him. She also feels bad for her friends that they were thrown out of her house. And she just knows something like this can never happen again. The problem was that she also couldn't really stand up to Nicholas. She just didn't have what it takes. So she took a route that seems strange, maybe to you and I, but actually makes sense considering her young age. So what did she do? She started doing everything exactly the way Nicholas wanted it. Everything to keep the peace in the house. Everything to get him to not freak out again. Nicholas, in the meantime, had cut off all social contacts and demanded Caroline to do the same. And she did. So she started to decrease the time she spent with her friends to a minimum. She would never get angry at him. She would never yell at him. She would only talk to him in a very quiet and very peaceful voice. And she basically ended up acting like a mother who kept an eye on Nicholas eating and drinking enough when he was high again. She really tried to get everything right. And yet, Nicholas every day found something to complain and freak out about. I mean, just between you and me, I would punch this guy into a whole new dimension. But okay. But despite all of her efforts, things didn't really get better. And at some point, Caroline just knew that Nicholas actually needed professional help. And she talked to him about that, but he again refused profusely. So to her, there was obviously no other way but just endure it. Just deal with the outbursts and his tantrums, sugarcoating things, saying stuff like, oh, it wasn't so bad today, or it's just a phase. But if she was being completely honest with herself, deep down she knew that Nicholas wasn't a partner anymore. Instead, he just turned into the spoiled brat, throwing tantrums when he didn't get his way. And thus, we come to the physical side. Nothing normal to be found here either. Look, what used to be mutual passion became completely one-sided. And even in that area of their relationship, Nicholas became more and more demanding and selfish. Get this, he started waking up Caroline in the middle of the night, demanding sex. Right effing now. Again, I would punch this dude. Now, honestly, I'm being curious. Leave it down in the comment section. What would you do if your boyfriend did that to you? But that's not all. Then came the fetishes. All of a sudden, Nicholas wanted to wear stockings and high heels in bed. He wanted to be tied up and beaten and tortured. He wanted to watch hardcore porn while they were doing it. And he even asked Caroline to, pee in his mouth. And even though that was miles away from her comfort zone, she didn't dare say no. She had done that once and then never again. Because when she did, he again had one of his outbursts and he became so insulting and he started mocking her. And it was clear that he didn't give a shit about her boundaries. Apparently, he doesn't really give a shit about her altogether because in order to compensate for what he was missing, Nicholas started to sleep with other women. On one occasion, even with one of their own roommates, which is quite convenient since he hates leaving the house. Now you'd probably be like, okay, Holly, please tell me she dumped his ass. No. And the thing is, he didn't really hide his affairs, okay? Caroline saw and heard everything. Yes, she was hurt. But surprisingly to her, there was this other feeling that kind of diminished the feeling of betrayal and hurt. And that was relief. Caroline felt relieved. Let someone else deal with his moods for a minute. And believe it or not, but that was just the tip of the iceberg. Look, 3 years after they moved in together, Nicholas had another very strange request. And so he ended up telling Caroline that he had met a woman named Kathy, and she was 2 years younger than the 21-year-old Caroline. And Nicholas told Caroline that he fell in love with Kathy and that he wanted them to be in one relationship together, the three of them. So Caroline wasn't thrilled. Yeah, I know. But again, she went along with it and she agreed and she even participated in the shared sexual experiences. But as it turned out, this arrangement had an upside to it. Because unlike Caroline, Kathy did have her boundaries and she was not afraid to communicate them. And she also seemed to have this very calming effect on Nicholas. Although I have to mention at this point that Nicholas still pulled it together at least a little bit when he was with Kathy. So he treated her better. But eventually, Kathy was also introduced to his second violent, loud, and evil side. And after 2 years of being in this relationship, Kathy left Nicholas and thus Caroline. And so Caroline watched all of this going down. And she watched Kathy walk away, and she had to admit to herself that she kind of admired her for having the strength to walk away from this toxic relationship. Because Caroline knew deep down that she still could not do it. Even though, despite everything that Nicholas put her through, she still loved him. But then, just a couple of months later, Nicholas had another request. So outrageous. That was the breaking point. He demanded that Caroline find him a minor that he could keep as a slave. And that was it. Shit hit the fan. Caroline lost it. She was like, who am I, call a homoka or what? So 6 months after Kathy had moved out and ended the relationship, peace finally returned to the house altogether because Nicholas doesn't live there anymore. Caroline finally found the strength to throw him out of the house and out of her life for good. Surprisingly, she got over him fast, which might have something to do with her new love, Benny. So Benny worked as a zookeeper and he didn't have an evil and violent second side. And Caroline was finally happy again. But then, 6 years later, a young college student, a young woman, showed up at a police station in Munich with a very crazy story. So this woman told the officers that she had this friend who had once lived in the Villa Vilcula in this house, and that this friend had told her out of nowhere that this house holds a dark secret and that strange things are going on in that house. He also said that there was a body buried in the garden and that there are murderers living in the house. So this woman didn't really know what to make of it all. She didn't really believe this whole story. So she decided to go talk to another friend of hers who was also studying at the same university. So she knew that this other friend had also lived at the Villa Villacola for quite some time. And so she went up to this friend and asked her to confirm this story. And this friend did. And that was enough for this young woman to go to the police. And so, just a few days later, very early in the morning, a SWAT team knocked on Caroline's house. Caroline opened the door, still in her pajamas and sleep-deprived, but she was clearly shocked to see the officers standing in front of her door. And these officers did not lose a lot of time. They got straight to the point, saying that they have reasons to believe that there is a body buried in her garden. So Caroline is just standing there, and she's looking on the ground. She doesn't really say much. She doesn't deny it. But eventually, she raised her head, pointed to the garden, and said, quote unquote, next to the compost. And a couple of hours later, they really unearthed a body, which wasn't that surprising. They were expecting that. Yet the look of the body and how they found it was quite grim. Get this, the corpse was wearing a pair of yellow-green swim goggles over its hollow eyes with black tape covering the lenses. Dental records confirmed it was Nicholas, and the autopsy revealed massive injuries. Both collarbones and both thigh bones were cut through. The spine had been nearly severed, maybe even sawed, between the 7th cervical and 1st thoracic vertebrae. Caroline was asked about the murder weapon, and she admitted to have used a circular saw. Now, they didn't find the circular saw on her property. What they did find in a blue plastic bag were her diaries, 4 of them, in which Caroline wrote everything down. All the years of horror and being in this toxic relationship and thinking about wanting him dead. The trial began in February of 2017, and Caroline sitting alone in the defendant's chair, even though her boyfriend Benny and another acquaintance of theirs are also in custody. More on that in a minute. So Caroline is charged with murder committed with malice aforethought. Caroline's lawyers, however, argue for a conviction for manslaughter instead. Caroline just couldn't take it anymore. She had long since been unhappy in her toxic relationship, but her boyfriend asking her to find him a minor to keep as a slave, that was enough. That was the breaking point. And Caroline ended up throwing Nicholas out of the house. But Nicholas returned. And once again, Caroline gave in and took him back. And that's not it. The same evening, when Nicholas made advances towards her, she also went along with it. Nicholas wanted to have sex his way. So he reaches into his nightstand. He takes out the yellow-green swimming goggles. He puts them on. He gets undressed and then lies on the bed and asked Caroline to tie him up, which she did. So now Nicholas is lying there and is waiting to be satisfied by Caroline. But Caroline is just standing there, right next to the bed, not saying anything, not doing anything. She is just looking down at her boyfriend, who, tied up and defenseless, all of a sudden doesn't seem so frightening anymore. And Caroline suddenly realizes there is only one way out of all of this, and this is the moment. So she looks around and she spots the circular saw that Nicholas had recently used and hadn't put away again. He didn't even pull the plug. So Caroline picks up the circular saw and she turns it on, and the blades start running. She positions it and then cuts through Nicholas's cervical vertebrae with the circular saw while he is still alive. It takes only seconds, and yet it feels like an eternity until Nicholas lies dead before her. So after killing her boyfriend, Caroline washed herself and otherwise just left everything as it was, and she just locked the doors to the attic, promising to herself that she was never gonna go up there again. And so Caroline just returned to her daily routine, living and sleeping in her room on the ground floor, pretending nothing's happened, while the corpse of her ex-boyfriend Nicholas is lying just above her in the attic. Whenever someone asked about Nicholas, she would just say that they broke up and that she doesn't know where he went. But eventually, the smell of decomposition becomes unbearable. So Caroline is basically forced to climb up to the attic again, and she tried to dismember his rotting body with this circular saw. Unfortunately for her, the circular saw gave up halfway through. So Caroline is like, oh, damn, I don't want to go up there again. And so the only thing she can think of is to cover up the smell with incense sticks, which actually seemed to work until spring of 2009, when her new boyfriend Danny discovered the body in the attic. So Caroline returned from vacation, right? And she actually had expected her boyfriend to just jump at her and be all happy, but he just looked at her with this seriousness and sadness in his eyes. And this is when Caroline knew. She knew that he knows. So now he knows everything. And this is it. Everything's gonna fall apart. He's gonna tell on her. He's gonna go to the police. He will break up with her. She will end up in jail. And so she has this complete mental breakdown in front of him. She starts crying. But surprisingly to her, Benny is not angry or sad or frightened or anything. Instead, he just looks at her and he says, okay, this is the situation. And now I want to hear your side of this story. So Caroline ended up telling him everything. Benny knew that she had this toxic boyfriend called Nicholas, but he didn't really know the details. So when Caroline was finished with her story, Benny told her that he was not going to go to the police. He will cover for her. He won't say a word. But Benny has one request. The body's gotta go. So the plan was to bury the body in the garden. But then he soon figured that he couldn't do it alone. So he brought in a friend of his, a gardener by chance, and told him about the situation. And this garden friend was like, okay, yeah, let's do it. He didn't object, or I don't know. So everyone, Caroline, Benny, and this friend knew exactly what they had to do. So Caroline was responsible for digging the grave. And then Benny and this friend, they wanted to clean the attic and, get the body, put it in the grave. So Benny and his friend, they walk up the stairs to the attic and they again try to dismember the body with the circular saw, which is quite difficult, as they soon have to realize, if you have to throw up the entire time. So one day later, they want to try it again, but this time they are prepared. So they drink a couple of beers beforehand, have a couple of joints beforehand, take a little bit of cocaine, they put on mint oil soaked masks, and finally get to work. So they actually managed to grab the body, carry it down the stairs to this grave in the garden, and after that they just painted over the bloodstains and hid the bloody mattress behind a wall. So from that point on forward, everything was done. The only thing that was left to do is cope with it all. Deal with it all. And apparently Benny wasn't as good at it as Caroline and his friend, the gardener. Now, in his defense, he actually managed to keep his mouth shut for 6 whole years. But then eventually, he just couldn't do it anymore. And then one evening when he was super drunk and high, he told one of the new roommates of the Villa Villacula about all of this and that there was a body buried in the garden. And this friend told another friend, and this friend, this woman, ended up going to the police. So at trial, again, Caroline repeated this entire story and everything that she had gone through, everything that she went through. And while she was doing that, she spoke in this very soft, almost childlike voice the entire time, just saying that the memories were kind of blurred and fragmented. Now, good news for Caroline, her diaries, they were proof, evidence. At least they made her story more believable. Bad news for her, police couldn't find any evidence, any proof that Nicholas was really into minors, and it's still not confirmed today. They never found anything, neither on his computer nor in his porn stash. So obviously they also had a psychiatric expert take a look at Caroline, and this psychiatric expert described Caroline as highly intelligent but deeply dependent, and saying that she was lacking autonomy and confidence. And even though no one could really believe it, considering just the horror and brutality of this crime, but she had no mental illness. The key question was it murder? What's more, was it murder committed with malice aforethought? The prosecution said yes, saying that Caroline had planned this murder all along. This is the only reason why she went with Nicholas to the bedroom and pretended that she was in on it. This is why she tied him up, thus making Nicholas defenseless. And thanks to the goggles, he didn't know what was coming. The defense said no, it wasn't a murder committed with malice aforethought. There was no plan. Yes, she had written in her diaries that she sometimes thought about Nicholas being dead, but according to them, that was not a plan. That was just daydreaming. That was just imagery. And in March 2017, the court ruled manslaughter. Caroline ended up being sentenced to 12.5 years in prison. The court didn't find the murder trait of malice aforethought fulfilled. Nicholas had made himself willingly vulnerable. Benny received 2 years and 8 months for obstruction of justice, and his gardening friend received a prison sentence of 2 years and 3 months for the same charge. And that, my dear children, was the story of the circular saw murder of Munich. I really want to know you guys' thoughts on this case, so leave them down in the comment section down below. And if you haven't already, you can give this video a thumbs up. You can also subscribe to my channel if you want. It's really a nice thing to see, and I know that you enjoy what I do here on my cute little channel. I will hopefully see you again in 2 weeks for our next case, case 2, Deadly Woman. And for this case, we'll be traveling to Spain and take a look at a man-eater. So I'm really looking forward to that. Until then, have a lovely weekend ahead of you. Try to relax a little bit. Kiss and hugs. And I'll see you in 2 weeks.